Welcome back to The Explainer. So today we're diving headfirst into what I like to call the micro-society of the modern workplace. We're going to uncover those invisible forces that govern exactly how we behave in groups. If you've ever found yourself wondering why the dynamics at your job feel so incredibly complex, well, you're about to get some answers.
I mean, think about it. Picture your own workplace right now, or maybe a committee you were just on. Why is it that just getting together in a group completely transforms how we act? You know exactly what I'm talking about. The person who's super quiet on their own suddenly becomes the loudest voice in the room, or your classic go-getter just steps back into the shadows. Understanding these psychological shifts is absolutely crucial if you want to unlock real organizational success.
So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at groups versus formal teams. Then, categorizing our work groups, the 5 stages of development, the power of cohesiveness, group structure and norms, and finally, the wild dynamics of decision-making.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, groups versus formal teams.
You know, a really common mistake is assuming that just any gathering of individuals is a group. But in the world of organizational behavior, a mere collection of people, like, say, strangers waiting at a bus stop, that just doesn't cut it. To truly be a group, you need continuous interaction. And most importantly, you need a shared goal, or a shared need, that binds everyone's efforts together. Basically, their behaviors have to be totally interdependent.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. While a group can just sort of naturally form around shared social needs, a formal team is deliberately built. Companies construct different types of teams, think cross-functional teams or self-managed ones, and these require complementary skills, a lot of targeted team-building processes, and a really strict sense of mutual accountability. It's not an accident. A team is a purposeful construction designed for high impact.
Moving right along to our second section, categorizing our work groups. Organizations basically divide these groups up into 2 buckets. First, you've got your formal work groups. These act as the official machinery of the company, your command groups, your committees, designed to specifically hit those organizational goals. But on the flip side, we have informal work groups. These act as the vital, living social shadows of the organization. Friendship cliques and interest groups naturally pop up because, let's face it, a company simply cannot fulfill all the personal and social needs of its employees on a corporate level. And size matters here too. Have you ever wondered why you might feel so much more motivated in a tight-knit little squad rather than being a tiny cog in a massive impersonal department? It's because group size changes the whole dynamic. In small groups, information flows super easily, and your individual contributions get recognized right away. But in larger groups, that personal contact drops off a cliff. Communication gets clunky, and honestly, overall satisfaction usually takes a pretty big hit. Okay, section 3, the 5 stages of development. Groups aren't just magically perfect on day 1. Tuckman's model actually maps this evolution out in 5 stages. We start with the polite, kind of awkward exploration in the forming stage, where everyone's just trying to figure out how they fit in. Then, boom, we inevitably hit storming. This stage is full of resistance and conflict over leadership and control, but if the group survives that storm, they reach norming, where cohesion and common purpose actually take root. That sets the stage for performing, where the real work finally gets done. And eventually, for temporary projects, there's the adjourning stage.
But here is a major reality check for you. This is not always a neat, perfect staircase. The research clearly shows us that groups don't always move beautifully from one step to the next. In fact, groups can actually get completely trapped in the conflict of that storming phase for their entire existence, just endlessly battling over control instead of actually performing. Which brings us nicely to section 4, the power of cohesiveness.
Once a group matures, it develops cohesiveness. And really, group cohesiveness comes down to one powerful metric, the attractiveness of a group to its members. A highly cohesive group creates this immense psychological pull. It makes members want to stay, participate actively, and be fiercely loyal. They unite instantly against outside threats and communicate with lightning speed.
So what actually creates that magnetic pull in the first place? A few things. A smaller group size helps for sure, but also a homogeneous character, meaning the members share similar ages, educational backgrounds, or core values. Add in the shared thrill of actually succeeding at your goals, or even just the sheer difficulty and exclusivity of getting into the group in the first place. When you have those factors, cohesiveness just skyrockets.
Let's pivot to section 5, group structure and norms.
With all that intense cohesiveness, you need a framework to direct all that energy.
That's where group structure steps in to dictate exactly who does what. Group composition is a massive piece of this puzzle. Homogeneous groups usually have a much easier time coordinating and sharing information than really diverse, heterogeneous ones. Then you have group status, which is the prestige earned based on the importance of the group's tasks, and of course group roles, which spell out the exact expected behaviors and hold people accountable.
But listen, structure isn't always something you'll find written down in a corporate handbook. We also have to talk about norms. Norms are the unwritten, unspoken rules of acceptable behavior that protect the group and give it its unique identity. And they are strictly enforced by your peers. If you conform to the norms, you get verbal praise and support. But if you deviate, the group will absolutely apply tremendous social pressure or punishment to drag you back in line.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 6, Dynamics of Decision-Making.
Now, we usually rely on groups because we want diverse perspectives, right? We want greater buy-in on decisions. But this comes with a major limitation known as the shared responsibility trap. The very nature of being in a group can dilute personal responsibility. Think about it. When everyone is responsible, nobody feels individually on the hook. This can turn decision-making into a painfully slow, delayed, and sometimes shockingly ineffective or even heartless process.
And then there's the dreaded groupthink. This actually happens when a group becomes entirely too cohesive. To preserve harmony and avoid stepping on anyone's toes, the group starts valuing consensus way more than decision quality. People just suppress their dissenting opinions, and as a result, a room full of incredibly smart, capable people might make a completely terrible decision, all just to keep the peace.
Which naturally leads us to another classic pitfall, social loafing. You've probably seen this one in action. It's the dynamic where individuals intentionally exert less effort in a group than they would if they were working solo. They basically hide in the crowd, keep their heads down, and happily let everyone else do the heavy lifting while still taking all the credit for the group's success.
So, we've unpacked the whole anatomy of workplace groups today, from those early forming stages right through to the psychological traps of groupthink and social loafing. Now, I want to leave you with this to think about. Take a hard look at your own workplace teams. Which stage of development is your team currently trapped in? And what invisible, unwritten norms are secretly holding you back? Think about how you can actively pull your team out of the storming phase and start building true, high-performing cohesiveness. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.